Oh, I guess I've been talking, but only to myself.
I thought so. That's why I asked the question, right?
That's funny. I thought you and I were carrying on a conversation because I was talking, you're typing in the direct message to me, I'm taking it all on board and answering you, and we seem to be progressing just fine. Like we're reading each other's minds, and it's working great.
Okay, I think it's time and the floor is yours, Jim, for the first three items.
Yeah, and thank you, Roger. I'm looking in the chat room there. I was having a lovely conversation with myself. Antoine and I were in sync. It was just, he didn't have to hear me. We were doing great. So, all right. It is half past the hour, so let's jump in. It's already the second day of the IETF. I think people are used to starting on time here. Yes, recording is going on. Okay, good thing. So I'm going to kick off this meeting. We only have a 1 hour meeting this time. This is the Registration Protocols Extensions Working Group at IETF111. I'm Jim Galvin, and we have Antoine Verschuren here with us, your co-chairs for this vigorous and engaging working group. Thank you very much for making time to be with us today. And, sorry, I'm just having a little bit of technical difficulty there with a new mouse. Okay, so quickly, the first thing to get to is the note well. We're gonna move ourselves along here smartly through our slides. I presume that folks have already seen this if you've been at this meeting at all in the last day and a half, and of course you've seen this a lot. Basically, it does mean that the IETF really does own anything that goes on in this meeting, any contributions that you make in your chat room, over audio, that kind of thing. Please do pay attention to our anti-harassment procedures and code of conduct. And with that, we will move on to taking a look at our agenda here. We didn't really have until late on some new work presentations that were requested. So we're going to give some time to that at the end. But otherwise, we're quickly just going to jump through our existing work and call it out for people and remind people in general that the way that work moves along here is somebody has to take an interest in it and do what needs to happen here to move something along. So moving on to the introductions, which are already at. Oh, a note scribe. Do we have a note scribe? We don't. Is there anyone who will volunteer to be a note scribe for us? Please, you can just put the notes right into the codec, the note-taking tool there. We really do need someone who's willing to take some notes against the agenda, folks. This is the usual kind of IETF working group hardship, is finding someone who's willing to take some notes against the meeting and the agenda, take note of what happens. We'll manage the chat room ourselves, so we're not looking for a jabber scribe. And Rick Wilhelm, thank you, Rick, so much. You need to get logged in. Okay, well, we'll let you get to that. I'm sure that you'll catch up as we go along here. On the point about document management, just a reminder, we have in general adopted a guideline that other working groups in the IETF use, where we really do want a document shepherd to come on board with a document when we take a document on. We do currently have one document on our docket, which does not have a document shepherd at the moment. But we don't normally do that. We really are trying to help facilitate our own processes here. And getting people to volunteer to do that is a helpful thing. At least it ensures we have another engaged participant to help move our documents along. So please do remember and volunteer to do that. Good way to get an introduction to the process too, if you're a new participant here in this working group and others, is volunteer to be a shepherd. We're certainly willing to help guide you through all that. Okay, Moving on, let's talk about published works. We're actually a pretty good working group because, at least lately, between the last couple of meetings, we've had quite a bit of documents, quite a number of documents published. Of course, I guess for a long time, we had quite a number that were just sort of hanging out there on our docket. But over the last 6 to 9 months, we've pushed a number of documents out and up into the ISG, and they have been making their way along. So we've had 4 documents published since the last time, including the other half of data escrow, the DNRD objects mapping document. We have EPP, unhandled namespaces, now taken care of and put out there. And we have the now full internet standard RDAP query and response standards, specifications. And so, thanks to the working group, congratulations to us in moving those documents along. There's one more in the RDAP series, but that should progress between now and the next meeting. So then we will have all 5 of the RDAP documents at full internet standards. So that's a good success story on our side. Moving along in our agenda, let's take a quick look at other documents which are in the publication process. Registry maintenance notifications, that's an EPP extension, is out there with the ISG. It's currently in AD evaluation. And Mary, you jumped in the queue. Please go ahead.
Just an update. I had requested last call on that one. The outstanding updates they can be counted as last call feedback, so that should be on its way.
All right, excellent, excellent. Thank you. That's good to know. We've had that document around for a bit. And then there's the secure authorization information document. It's currently an ISG evaluation. There was maybe one concern for the working group to consider, but it was Benjamin Kaduk who he actually withdrew his question, so the document can move along. But we did think it was appropriate to see if there was anyone who wanted to say anything more about this particular issue. He was raising a question. It actually came up on the mailing list. There was some discussion about it. We just want to give an opportunity for anyone in the working group to speak up if they want to say something about this. And Jim Gould, you're in the queue. Go ahead, please. And Jim, if you're speaking, we're not hearing you.
You can't hear me?
No,
Yes, we can now.
Oh, yeah, now. Good. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I was the one discussing this with Benjamin and going back and forth on this particular item. The specific concern was associated with returning an empty auth info to the sponsoring client as an indication that the auth info has been set. The concern there was that it was inconsistent to the non-sponsoring client. And we specifically did not want to provide an indication to the non-sponsoring client that the auth info was set or unset. So in that scenario, the auth info would not be returned to the non-sponsoring client. And in the case of the sponsoring client, it would return it if it were set, and it would not return it if it was not set. Now, as far as when this particular feature was added to the draft, I look back, and this was added in 03 of the pre-working group document. So this particular feature in the exact language in the draft has been there since it became a working group document. So I would hope that the working group has had opportunity to review that language and that we would be able to have a consensus position that feature is fine. So, like I said, the last message from Benjamin was that he felt like it was a whim on his part or a preference. So it's really up to the working group to determine whether or not there's an issue from a consensus perspective on that particular element of the draft. Thank you.
So James, excuse me, Antoine. So what do you propose as procedure? We can just continue, go ahead, and or do you want to have the working group look at it again?
I'm not sure if that's delayed.
Yeah.
You can hear me good. Okay. My preference is to move forward unless there's somebody that objects to it moving forward based on that particular raised issue from Benjamin. I believe that since it's been in the draft, I haven't heard of any concern related by the working group of that particular feature. And if there's no raised concerns, to have it move forward.
Yeah. Okay. Back to you, Jim.
Okay. I think that we probably should, Antoine, you or I should just, close the loop on this on the mailing list, just so it's clear. But as far as I can tell, I think the ISG is going to go forward unless we say something different. So we'll make a point of responding on the list just to close the loop here, so that there's the historical record has a note that we're moving forward, and that'll give folks one last chance if they want to say something. Now would be the time, up until we send our note. And I see in the chat room that Roger Carney's just indicating that he supports moving this forward. So that's good. Thank you for that +1, Roger. Okay. So with that, moving on, let's move into existing work. And in this case, we're going to take, hopefully not more than 5 minutes a document to jump into these. And Antoine's going to take over the meeting. I'm going to jump right in first and just give my quick report on the first document there, simple registration reporting. As you have no doubt seen, we did publish a new version in time to just meet the deadline back on the 12th. And thank you very much. There have been some excellent comments on the list, and we will continue to take those on board, and we will get another version out. There were some comments that I think were substantive enough that we will revise the document and then look to see if there's any other substantive comments. But ideally, this document is very close to being done. So after addressing the comments that we've just gotten, I fully expect that we will ask for working group last call on this document. And just to be clear about my status, I'm recusing myself from the process of advancing this document. So Antoine will be fully handling this. Just wanted to call that out for clarity for folks. And with that, if there's any other questions about the status of this document, I'm happy to take them. And otherwise, I turn the meeting over to you, Antoine.
Yes, and that will take us to our next existing Word document, which is the RDAP reverse search. Mario, do you want us to run your slides, or do you want to run them yourself? Oh, first, James in the queue. Sorry, Mario.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You can scroll the slide for me, or yes.
Okay, because we have the buttons in here.
Both the presentation are very short, so just a couple of slides each one.
We still have Jim Gould with his hand up. Why don't we let Jim Gould jump in here?
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, I had posted a message on the list related about the inclusion of the concrete reports in that draft. Are you planning on removing those reports, or what are you going to do about the reports themselves? My feedback was to include the framework, but the concrete reports themselves should be removed.
So, so far, we've been wanting to put them in there, right? I mean, the idea originally was to fill up the registry with both the data elements and the initial proposed reports. So what I need to do is really to kind of push on that on the list and see if we can get some other discussion about it. I think another next step too, I'll offer this, is part of the reason for including the reports is you might remember this, Jim. The report specifications came from a number of documents that the ICANN Tech Ops group had drafted and put together. So I think what I want to do here is also to expose this document one more time. Maybe we'll have a joint meeting between Regex and Tech Ops, as we've done in the past a few times, and put this document in particular on the agenda and have some broader discussion about whether or not to remove those things. So I'm hesitant to just say, yes, I take your point. but I think we were accommodating their existence elsewhere. And if we take them out of this document, then they need to come into existence somewhere and in some way, and we need to have that discussion. Okay?
I think that's yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, though.
Still have a comment, James, or? No. Okay. First in the queue, out of the queue. I'll start the next presentation, which is the search document. Okay, Mario.
Yes.
You
May I
have 5
start?
minutes
Yes.
to present your updates.
Yes. Only 2 slides about this draft. The first slide is about the versions that have been published since last IETF meeting. The 06 version, I have updated the privacy consideration and the security consideration as a follow-up of the feedback from the last meeting, and I added an appendix about the paradigms to enforce access controls on reverse search in RDAP. Unfortunately, since last IETF, I have not received any technical feedback. I was hopeful to receive technical feedback because I guess that the feedback about privacy considerations is now over. So now I'm waiting for any questions or any feedback about how to implement technically this solution. I wonder if there is enough interest in this working group in carry on this document, in moving forward this document. If I think that if there will be no relevant feedback about the technical solution in the next months, I'm quite convinced to withdraw the document, but at the same time, I expect that in this case, this kind of topic will not be addressed for the next 5 years at least. Next slide, please. The last slide is to make evident how despite what is the interest collected in this working group, outside this working group, the interest about reverse search capability is high, because the European Commission started the last step about the process to enact a law on a European common exchange system with secure channels for the handling of authorized cross-border communication, authentication, transmission of data access requested and data requested between the competent authorities and service providers. According to this proposal, the deadline to comply with foreign data access about e-evidence, the so-called e-evidence, should be in emergency cases maximum 16 hours. So, and it is needless to say that reverse search, reverse WIS in particular in the document, is one of the maybe the most important capability is supporting a cyber investigation. So that's all about this draft. I would like to invite everybody to provide technical feedback about this document, to move the document forward, and to discuss about how to implement it really implement it. Thanks a lot for the attention.
Okay, anybody, any questions for Mario? I have to remind everybody that this document has been in our queue for a long time, especially because there was originally issues from the Human Rights Working Group on especially the privacy considerations. Mario has done quite some work on it, but we really need a good, proper review for everybody that thinks that this document should move forward. So when Mario will propose a review on the list, I propose that everybody will at least say they support the document, and I'm happy to progress with it, Mario. Then let's see the next document. Let's share the share slides again. Now I have to see where I was heading, and perhaps it's also nice for you to see my face. The federated authentication for registry data access protocol using OpenID. Scott, I don't know if you have any things to say about this document, or we just still waiting for the implementation of ICANN?
Sure, this is Scott Hollenbeck. The document was recently updated. It was getting ready to expire, so I had a couple of minor changes queued up, made those. Mario did give me another suggestion for clarification that I'll be incorporating into another update, when the opportunity presents itself. But yes, we really are kind of holding off on this one to make sure that, for example, the set of purposes is appropriate for, use in an ICANN context. I mean, that's the immediate use case that we have. Of course, if anyone knows of other use cases that aren't covered and they know of other purposes that the document could include, that would be welcome input as well.
Yes, but for the rest, that's the primary thing we're waiting for, right? Okay. Then moving along to the next one, using JS Contact, and that's Mario. You're going to present that again, so I'll put up your slides.
Here I am again.
Let's see the JS Contact slides, and here they are. Go ahead, Mario.
Okay, jump to the next slide, please. Yes, this since last meeting, 3 versions have been published, mostly consequent to the updates to the JS Contact specification. A particular update is the recommendation of some map keys to be used in RDAP response that we can see in the next slide, please. Since in JS Contact specification, most of the collections are represented as maps, so the authors have made taken this decision because they are convinced that this kind of representation is better treatable with respect to the arrays. So there is the problem to assign some meaningful keys to some maps representing some collections in JS content. So our idea is to use some well-known labels as map keys. So to use the org label for the organization map, the int and the lock for the addresses map, and the other well-known label that are defined in RFC 5733 to identify the emails, an email in the mails map, a voice in the phones map, and effects in the phones map. So next slide, please. Just a few words about the JS content tools that I have presented an update about this library in the recent RAW meeting. This is an open source Java library for JS content creation, validation, serialization, deserialization, conversation from and to any dialect of vCard dialect, any vCard format, to JS content, from and to JS content. And now the last version is compliant with all the JS content specification and this draft in particular. So it is able to assign automatically the keys as described in the previous slide to the maps without any particular effort. So if you want to try to implement this draft, you can consider this library if you are Java programmers, to make it very easy to implement the transition between from JCard to JS content. Next slide, please. The next steps are that basically to add other implementation to the proposal. There is an ongoing implementation by Central NIC. It is already it has been already done, but it's not live but now currently, but it will be live soon. And I expect that there will be other registry that wish to implement the draft if following the feedback from last row. Now the JS content patch is very close to being submitted to the ISG. Last real open issue is about how to handle localization, and probably this will be done through a JSON patch like approach. I would like to ensure Mark that have provided a feedback on the mailing list about the visibility of this approach. I recently made some tests by using the Jackson library, Java Jackson library, and I implemented this approach without any particular customization. So it took me 1 hour to implement this approach on JS Contact. So I think that this is in this case this seems to be the most flexible approach to provide localization for every JS Contact content, JS Contact information. Next slide, please. And that's all from my side about this proposal.
Okay, anybody any questions for Mario? No, no questions. Okay, then we will move on to the list to move this document along. Then we go back to the chair slides again. And we are on this page. Next document, existing work, is the use of internationalized email addresses in the EPB protocol. And I think Dimitri isn't here to talk about it. He did leave some notes back to, I think it was James. Was it you who he said?
I can speak to this, the status of this draft.
Yeah.
If you're ready. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So first thing, there was really no discussion on the list for this draft. So Dimitri and I discussed offline one TBD item that was in the draft, which was associated with a placeholder email value, an ASCII value to deal with really the transition period where clients and servers don't fully support EAI and the other side of the connection doesn't support it, and the particular email element is required. And this particular use case exists in the contact mapping, RFC 5733, where email is required. So in the case where the only value that exists is an internationalized email address, and the client needs to create the contact in the server, what should the client pass? In this scenario, in the draft, it specifies to use a placeholder value. That's not a real email address. It's a placeholder and an indication of the fact that the only email that's available is an internationalized one, and the server doesn't support internationalized emails. So therefore, this placeholder value is sent to meet the needs of the protocol. Once the server does in fact support internationalized email addresses, then the contact can be updated with an EAI address. So what we did was, well, I posted a message to the list defining the set of requirements for that placeholder, as well as a proposal. And the proposal was to use the RFC 7535empty.as112.arpa domain name, which is a black hole domain, and then to add on their EAI at. So the whole idea is it's an ASCII email address that will not have any MX records, will not go anywhere, but it's needed only when the email is required by protocol and the only value available is an internationalized email address. So pretty much what I'm looking for from the working group is any feedback on that particular placeholder value. And I believe Scott raised a question to the chairs to get some outside email expert advice on this.
Yes, that's correct, James. The chairs have got a request, and that's also why we are discussing it here in the meeting, of course, because this is a placeholder for an email address, and that, as far as we know, it has not been used before. So we have host names, we have domain names like example.com, we have specialized IP addresses, but an email address as a placeholder, as far as we are aware, has not been defined yet. So the question is, do we need to define it first, or is this the definition? And we were actually
Well,
looking-
that's the proposed definition, because if you look at the set of requirements that's posted in the 01 version of the draft, it needs to be an ASCII email that would match validation requirements of the server. It also can't be a real email address, because it's pretty much, it's not the real email address, because it's an internationalized email that exists. But it's only needed, like I said, is during a transition period where, in this case, the server doesn't support internationalized emails, and that's the only value that exists. So it's really a corner case, but we can't ignore that case, and this is the way to get through that transition period.
Okay, Ulrich is in the queue. Ulrich, go ahead.
Yeah, James, I see where this value is, why you would, like to have this, but actually in practice, how useful will this be? As a registry, if I require an email address, I want a real email address where I can reach the registrant. And I will block this well-known value because I don't want it. I want a real one. And if it's not provided, I will not let the registration go through. So I really don't see how this, if the registry requires an email address which is not an EAI one, somebody has to provide it. And I don't think that a placeholder value will help.
I'll go ahead. Can I respond to that?
Yep.
Ulrich, I think the right solution to this is for you to support internationalized email addresses, therefore it can be really passed. The only reason why that placeholder is needed is the fact that you signal that you don't support it. So if you support it as a server, you'll get a real internationalized email address and you'll be able to use it. The only reason why the client has to do it is that you signal that you don't support internationalized email addresses. So would you support an international email address?
I understand that, but you see, what I'm saying is, you're totally right that I should support EAI. But in the case I don't, I still want to be able to reach the registrant, and I can only do that with a real email address, not with a fake one.
But then what happens if the registrant doesn't have an ASCII email address and all they have is an internationalized one? Then what?
That's a problem.
The point is that
that's a problem for the registrant because they won't get their domain.
So what will wind up happening is that then the only answer is that you would have to provide both.
Yes.
Until all servers support internationalized emails, right?
All registries where I would like to register a domain. Yes.
Right. So there's no transition period.
Well,
right?
I mean, not for the registry, because the registry either supports it or doesn't support it. But I mean, for example, in .se, I actually have the legal requirement to have an email address where I can reach the registrant. So I can,
and therefore,
legally, I cannot
support internationalized email addresses in the end.
Yeah,
if you have that
I agree in the end, but before that, so what I see is, for the transition period, the registrant needs to have two addresses, not the registry needs to support some fake value.
Okay, good.
So
you're
can I
saying
jump in here for a
there's no
minute?
transition.
I think we need to just get a hold of this conversation. I understand what's going on here. Let me offer the following. We are crossing a boundary here with respect to a policy concern versus a technical concern. And there are, as a policy matter, the email address may have to have certain characteristics, among them being that it has to actually work. I see that as a policy issue, not as a technical issue. So I still, and I know in a private conversation, James, you and I had, Jim Gould, you and I had a little small interaction about this issue. I think there are two things that have to happen at this point. One is we should actually get some comments from the email community, and we do have some advice from our ADs about a way to go do that, and the chairs will take that on as an action to make this document visible to an appropriate set of people to get a reaction from the email community about the use of a placeholder email address in this way. On the issue of the policy concern, I guess I'm not sure where to go with that right now, and I think that we need to take that discussion to the mailing list. One thing that I would suggest about it all is it might be interesting if we move forward in a joint meeting with the ICANN Tech Ops group, in part because we need to talk about the registration reporting. It has occurred to me that we could add this issue as a discussion point there, just to get some interesting viewpoints from other registrars and other registries that might be present there. And I think that that will also inform this discussion about what to do going forward. We're not going to make the decision here. I do think it's a valid question, and it's an important one, and we should follow each of those paths separately and get some more information, and then we'll see what we can do on the mailing list to make a decision here. That's what I would suggest at this point. Anyone want to react to that as a very bad idea, or indicate that that's a good idea, maybe even? And
Let's
I
take
see
it to
Rick
the
Wilhelm
list,
saying
Jim.
+1 in the chat room, which is good. And Jim Gould, go ahead.
Already a thread on the list that we can continue down this path as I put the proposal out there. Hopefully those can respond to that thread and we can continue to discuss on the list.
Yes, very much welcome that, Jim. You're exactly right. Let's move the discussion there. There's clearly some issues to be walked through. So, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Jumping in.
Take it
Back
to
to
the
you,
list.
Antoine.
Yeah, taking it to the list for further discussion. Thank you, Jim, for your suggestions. Moving along to the next document, which is still existing work, is the RFC 7484 BIS document. And that has been in working group last call. It has been closed and it will be submitted to the ISG soon as well.
It's actually waiting for a revised document. That's the issue at the moment.
Yes, now I remember. It passed working group last call, but it still needs a new version of the document before we can submit it to the ISG. So this is really a call on Marc Blanchet. I think it's holiday season, so that may be a reason. We're waiting for the next revision, and then we'll submit this one to the ISG. And then that means it's done for the standardization work of the RDEP service, right? Okay, then that was the existing work. Now, new work and request for adoption. And first we have Jody and Roger on the redacted fields. And who's in the queue for that?
Hi.
Jody, yes, go ahead, please.
Can anyone hear me? Sorry.
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you. Now we can't. There we go. Yeah.
Curious if you
Go
guys
ahead,
can hear
Jody.
me. I'm unable to hear you.
Oh. Go ahead, Jody.
Just curious, are you guys able to hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Why don't we jump to Ulrich on the last presentation and give Jody
Yes.
a chance to check his microphone there.
Yeah, because Jody, as soon as you start talking and say, "Can anybody hear you?" That's what we hear, and after that, there's nothing. So we'll move to Ulrich first, who will have a presentation on the registry log extension. And Ulrich, do you want to control the slides yourself?
Oh, if you control the slides, that's totally okay. I think it's
Yeah, it's okay.
not so many.
Then let's.
Yeah. So registry log automation. And next slide, please. So a small problem description is what you see here is basically the flow of somebody registering a domain. You are a customer, you go to a reseller or registrar, you try to register a domain, and the whole flow to the registry and back is fully automated. And so the next slide, please. That is a short description of the problem, hackers. So because if somebody hacks into this process, they can do whatever they want with your domain. And the next slide, please. So what registry log tries to do, and I realize that there is a lot of names for this. There's registry log and registrar log and registrant log and all of this. If you want to have a really good overview about all the different types of it, the center has done a working group, and they have had a real good document about all the different types of logging that are out there and how they work. But what they all have in common is that they want to stop the automated changes to domain names. And so somewhere in the process, there needs to be a manual human step before a change can go through. And it can be the customer, it can be the registrar, it can be the registry, but somebody has to do something. And so now you're wondering, didn't I say registry log automation in the beginning? And yes, that is definitely true. So what we try to automate is not the full registry log. What we try to automate is the locking, not the unlocking. Okay, next step, the next slide, please. Yes, so there's a document in the tracker. And next slide, please. So what the draft says is that you can change that the registry log, once the domain is logged, prevents any changes to the registration data. So update commands are rejected, delete and transfer command are rejected, but renew is still possible. So next slide, please. And so domains can then be locked with a simple lock command, either through when they're created or through an update command later on. And obviously there is no unlock because that has to be out of band. And next slide, please. So I redacted some of the EPP stuff here that needs to be in a create command, but what you basically see is the extension and it says block, and that's it. It has only one command, no data in it, and the domain is locked. And the next slide, please. So then what the extension allows is two types of unlocking. And one is permanently unlocking, so the domain is locked, the domain is unlocked, and it's basically the state that all domains are in today. And but the temporary unlocking is that you have, like, say, oh, I want to make a change to the domain, but then I want it to be locked again. And so you unlock the domain for a period of time, let's say half an hour or something. And it also allows you to say, I unlock the domain for 3 EPP commands, something like this. So yes, yes, and obviously for all changes to go through, there is an out-of-band authorization required. And I looked into this, how we could do this in band, but I really didn't see anything how we can securely connect an a digital signature to an EPP command. So that's why there's only out of band. And next slide, please. Yes, so then when you temporarily unlock the domain, so this would be the answer for an unlocked domain. So the domain is permanently unlocked. And then next slide, please. We have the locked domain. It says locked 1 or true. It's a Boolean value. So and next slide, please. And this is one that is temporarily unlocked with says a 1 EPP command, and to this point, until this point in time, it will be unlocked. Yeah, and the next slide, please. So there is a few things that need to be discussed in this, and that I don't have really good answers to yet. So what happens to subordinate hosts? Are they locked automatically too? What happens to connected contacts? I mean, if you lock your domain, but I can still change the registrant contact, that seems to be a security risk. But then again, this is policy. So, but I think we should say something about this, because if the policies vary too much, it will be really hard for registrars to implement this. And so must registries support the EPP command count, or what do they do if they don't support it? So, how are domains secured? I mean, if your domain is locked, but the name servers for the domain are not locked, then I can point them to new IP addresses. Would this be a problem? How should we handle this? Or should we just, put in some text that says, "Oh, look at this too"? And yes, this is the questions, and I would really like, some people to, come back with some, input how they would handle it, or how they would like to be handled. Yeah, and I think that was my last slide.
Thank you, Ulrich. Before we go to people in the queue, we have a little time left for Jody to have his talk if his microphone works. So what is my question to you, Ulrich? What is your intention for this document? Are you asking for adoption, or first ask for feedback?
I would ask for adoption and feedback. So because I think we should work on this, there needs to be some response from the community, but I think basically the basic process is very easy and settled. But I think some of the policy stuff around this needs to be discussed somewhere, and we need to find a way to do this.
So let's do that on the mailing list. Yep. I will close the queue, but the 2 people who are in the queue can still have their questions. So Alexander, you're first.
Thank you, Alexander Mayer from Phoenix.at. On the questions, I think you listed the really hard questions already, and I think those questions are indeed pretty much policy. So they shouldn't be in the EPP extension, I think. On the other hand, the information that's conveyed in the EPP extension is connected to the policy, of course. So it's a hard problem, but what I can offer, as you probably know, we are implementing some form of registry lock, or I think it's called registrar lock in our case, at the moment. So I can come back to you and answer those questions that you have there with our ideas. We get away without an EPP extension because we understood that if the only purpose of an EPP extension is switching the registrar lock on, then it's a very narrow part of the business process that probably only worthwhile as soon as there are other registries also using an EPP extension. Yeah, get the point.
Yeah. Do you support the adoption, Alexander?
If
to discuss it on the mailing list?
Yeah. I think I would support adoption in the near future. Yeah, if that makes sense, because I see more and more registries implementing registry lock or registrar lock, and so in the near future, there will be
Yeah.
more people be able to comment on the split between policy and so on and so forth, and the subordinate hosts. We can
Okay,
keep
so
it in
let's
our
answer
backyard, sort of.
the
Yeah.
question on the mailing list then.
Yeah.
And then Richard, last question for you.
To get my preferences there. Thanks. Real briefly, Rick Wilhelm Verisign. I think so. Registry lock. I think that there's a lot of general agreement that it's a good thing. However, I think that we should look long and hard about enabling registry lock via EPP, because it's a mechanism that actually helps protect against the registrar's EPP channel being compromised. And so even the notion of locking it over EPP is something that can lead to inadvertent consequences. For example, if a bad actor changes name servers and then also goes in and subsequently locks the name, that can lead to unintended consequences, essentially a denial of service, because it makes it more difficult for the legitimate registrar to flip things back. So overall, the notion of registry lock being an out-of-band thing and outside of EPP is actually a feature rather than a bug. So I think we should think hard before looking at standardizing a way to do it over EPP. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you, Ulrich, for your presentation. So we're looking forward to the questions on the mailing list and the request for adoption. And then we will go back to see if Jody is still alive, and he is back with his audio. Yes, we can hear you.
Can you still hear me? Test, 1, 2,
Now
3.
we can still hear you. Yes, thank you.
All right. Very sorry about that, guys. I'll be quick. This what we're requesting is a way to redact RDAP fields. Because of various privacy policies that have been enacted by several countries, certain contact values can no longer be returned in RDAP responses based on a client's privileges. For example, the contact name, address, email, phone number is not returned for contacts of certain countries for domain registrations. Now, because of that, some of the RDAP clients have asked, well, how can we tell, since nothing is returned for those fields, how can they tell if there was actual field value that was entered, or if the registrant just did not enter any information? Because of that, we've discussed putting in values of redacted or redacted due to government or privacy policies, etc., into each of these fields in order to signal that the actual value was redacted due to policy. But doing that would break the expected format of some of these fields. For example, the email and phone fields would not be formatted as an email or phone number correctly, and that would could lead to issues with RDAP client parsing. So in order to address some of these issues, this solution would allow fields to be blank, thereby not breaking any type of format parsing. The solution is to create an RDAP extension that would identify the redacted RDAP response fields using a JSON path as a default expression language. This would then allow requesters to be able to differentiate between a field being null because a registrant did not enter any information, or if the field was null because it was redacted. I know we've only got a couple minutes here, so I'll just stop there. And because of this, there has been quite a number of interest, or quite an amount of interest on the mailing list. So that's why we're requesting adoption. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jody. And we have at least a question from Wilhelm. Go ahead, Richard. You were still in the queue with your hand up. Okay, I have a question though, Jody. My question is, so all the policy around this has already been discussed within ICANN, right?
Yes, most of it has been discussed. I'm going to lean on Roger a little bit on here, but I think we've decided that yes, that this is the way that it should be. Roger, would you agree with that?
The only question I really have is, if the redacted response would be a policy decision.
I'm not sure I understand the question, Anton.
So, suppose I'm a registry, but I'm not an ICANN. I'm not an ICANN registry, and my local policy would be that I don't want anybody to know whether or not a field is redacted or not. So it would be an optional extension, right?
Yes, absolutely. I don't see this as an extension that every registry would be required to implement.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Richard was in and out the queue again, and Jim is in the queue, so I'll go over to Jim first.
Thank you. Let me offer a comment. Not wearing any hats here, just speaking personally. I support adoption of this document, and more generally, I think that there is a need in RDAP to be able to return one of 3 states. It's not just about whether data is present or not. You need to indicate, there needs to be a way in the response to indicate that there is data, but you can't have it. And that's really all that's going on here. It's just an extension that gives you the opportunity as a responder, as a server, to be able to give a client more information and give them that data point, that there is data, but I'm not going to give it to you. And it is needed by a variety of policies. So it really is an implementation issue. It's just adding another feature to RDAP that's not there, but it's not required, obviously. Whether or not one uses it and how you use it is completely a policy decision and a matter of local implementation. So I just wanted to offer that out there here on the list. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim, and thank you, Jody. And that was our last presentation for today. Jody, looking forward to the discussion and the adoption request on the mailing list, and then we're happy to move that along. And for that, I think this, oh, you wanted to say something, Jody? I guess not. It's button choosing time, right? Okay, if there is any other business, then we are 3 minutes late in this shorter meeting. I hope that next time when everybody is preparing for the meeting, please give us a heads up in time for us to judge the agenda time that we need. We just made it 3 minutes over time now. If there's any other business, then this will be meeting adjourned. And thank you for taking the minutes, Richard.
Antoine, you can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do. So,
Trying to get the minutes.
I did get a copy of them. I grabbed them.
Okay, you already have a copy. Of course, good.
Yeah, I figured that you were probably doing that too. I was hearing some typing, so
Yeah.
just wanted to let you know that I got them. I'm sure that Rick will, I don't know if he'll send them to us or not, but it's okay. I did grab a copy, so we'll we can put that together. Actually, I don't think we have to post anything since they're in the NodeMD or the CodeMD, do we?
I think we still have to post them to the data tracker.
Okay, not a problem. We'll trim those up and get them over there. So I'll take care of that. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And
Right.
for the rest, I think we will see each other.
Yeah, you have a good evening. I'm going to head over to the plenary here in a bit.
Evening.
So we'll see you next.
It's in the middle of the night, but I think I will join the plenary a little bit as well.
Okay.
And we'll discuss,
All right.
I think, somewhere this week or beginning next week.
You bet.
Okay,
See you
thank you, Jim.
Bye.
See you.